What a treat to be able to focus this month on the value of travel. Because this is kind of what I do, as I was telling the young worshipers. Pastor Jenna and Pastor Hector asked me to give the sermon. I don't think we can call it a sermon. I'm not a theologian, and I always start off saying that, but I love the Martin Luther notion of the priesthood of all believers. And with the priesthood of all believers, we can all share in our own walk of life just what our love of God means in the way that we teach, and we all make a difference. So I've spent a third of my adult life, 3 or 4 months a year since I was a kid, living out of a 9 by 22 by 14-inch carry-on-the-airplane-sized suitcase, hanging out with people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given. And what I've found is, we're talking about coming home. If you travel thoughtfully, coming home has a much broader meaning. When you travel, you realize creation is one, and just by knowing creation is one, it's a way of stepping into homeness. We get close to God by traveling and getting to know creation and getting to know the family, as I just told the kids. So for 4 weeks, we've been talking about that in the Adult Ed Hour. We've been reading my book, Travel as a Political Act, which you can take the political and swap it out with spiritual. And I would just like to say I really wanted to show photographs tonight or today, but I thought I would just dispense with that and talk directly to you. But this talk that I'm going to give now is kind of distilled from a 1-hour talk I gave at PLU a few months ago. And that talk is available on my website with all the photographs. If you just go to ricksteves.com and look in the talk section, you'll find Travel as a Spiritual Act, because the photographs are really, I think, fun to look at, and they enhance what I'm going to say. But today I just want to talk about the essence of lessons from the road, because all of us travel. And I'll talk later about how travel can be taking a hike here or going to all over the world. But when we travel, we have to choose. Do we want to travel as a tourist, a traveler, or a pilgrim? And that's our challenge. A tourist travels as a kind of consumption. A traveler travels in a way to learn about the rest of the world. And I think a pilgrim travels in order to learn more about themselves. So you can have a vacation, you can have an education, or you can have a transformational experience. Now, I'm not going to try to have people all travel like Henry David Thoreau and be transcendentalists, you know. But I think there's more to travel than Cancun. In fact, my mission in life is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. Because it's hard to have a transformational experience at Orlando, I would say. You can do better. So if we can travel a little bit as a pilgrim, we're going to travel in a way that changes us, and I think from a spiritual point of view gets us closer to God. We can travel in a way that gets us farther away from God. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Or we can travel in a way that we really get close to God. And I would just say the bottom line is mix it up. Mix it up. Be a little bit of a pilgrim. Don't be afraid of being a pilgrim. Now, this whole idea of coming home by leaving home is fascinating to me. I love the notion that we can learn more about ourselves and our world by leaving our world and looking at it from a distance. I learned so much about who we are by leaving this world and looking at it from a distance. And as I was just talking to the young worshipers, bottom line is we are not the norm. We think we're the norm, we like to think we're normal, but people who sit on a toilet to go to the bathroom are the oddballs on this planet. Most people squat over nothing. I was on an airplane in India where they had a stick figure in the head there, and it told people don't stand on the rim and squat over it. And it reminded me, oh, I'm not the norm. A lot of people have to be instructed how to use that little tool. I love the thought that I think of Jesus as a white guy who speaks English. It's okay. I relate to that. And you go to Sri Lanka and Jesus suddenly is a brown person who speaks Sinhalese. And you go to Brazil and Jesus is a Latino. And you go to deep Africa and Jesus is a black child. Of course, Jesus was Aramaic. He was in the Middle East. He was olive skin, and he did not speak a word of English. I can promise you that. So we need to be comfortable with the fact that we are ethnocentric, and we need to break out of that ethnocentrism. That's our challenge. And I just love that idea that we can broaden our perspective through travel, and we can also, I think of ethnocentrism as broadening us this way. There's more than one culture. The world's not a pyramid with us on top and everybody trying to figure it out. There's something I call chronocentrism. We tend to look at things through a 2023 mirror, or lens, that's politically correct, and that's what we try to do, see it in our sensibility. But I think we also need to remember there's different times that looked at things differently. And when we go back in time, we realize, I was just with a bunch of travelers in Warsaw in Poland, gathered together under a chandelier with one piano, listening to the beautiful music of hometown boy Chopin, the way Chopin thought his music would be listened to. Not with a symphony, not on the radio, not on a CD, but before any of that technology was around, in a salon concert. In fact, Franz Liszt earned his living transcribing symphonic works into works for piano with four hands in order that people could enjoy it in a salon setting. So I'm looking at music 2023, I can just talk to my phone and all of a sudden I can listen to my favorite tune. Well, of course, you couldn't do that 150 years ago. You'd be in a town that had no access to a symphony, that had no recorded music, and you'd go to your friend's house who knew a fiddler and had a piano, and you would hear your music that way. Understanding how to enjoy something in the context of its time. When I step into St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, for years I went in there as an angry Protestant. Why did they spend all this money on this gold and all of these saints and stuff? And then I realized, hey, it's a better experience if I park my Lutheran sword at the door and go in as a temporary Roman Catholic. Just take it on its terms. See it in its pre-Reformation intention. And the experience was much more positive, much more instructive, and it was then that I had the opportunity to appreciate what Christians did together in their way, with their context, to glorify God. To see that in a 500-year-old perspective made all the difference in the world. A lot of people wonder, what's the big deal about Martin Luther? Well, go back 500 years ago to a time when there was no ability for regular people to read the Bible because it wasn't allowed in any language other than Latin, and only the educated elites could speak Latin, and then it could be doled out to you and interpreted to you by church priests, and you realize what a radical thing Martin Luther did. Martin Luther was way more important than you could understand through a 2023 perspective. If you look at it in a 1517 perspective, then you see why so many people were burned at the stake, because they tried to translate the Word of God into a language people could access. That's getting away from our chronocentrism approach. That's appreciating things in its context. Who paid for it? Why? What was going on? When we leave home, we see things in different times, in different cultures, and we celebrate the fact that things are different. Diversity. I just love that we celebrate diversity here in this church. We have a policy that we stand by our Muslim neighbors. But we've actually had members of this church leave this church because we've made a deal that we stand by our Muslim neighbors. That's because they probably don't have a passport, they probably never knew a Muslim, they've probably never traveled. They've never gotten to know God's neighborhood. God's neighborhood is not a bunch of suburban, mostly white, Lutheran Christians. God's neighborhood is children of God all over this planet trying to figure out, how do I get close to God? Some do it through a Muslim cultural lens. We do it as Christians. 2 weeks ago, I was just in Istanbul, surrounded by minarets, and it was the call to prayer, a cacophony of noise. It used to freak me out. As a tour guide, I bring a lot of people to Turkey, and Americans and Christians just go, oh, minarets, Muslims, Allah, Allah. I know what he's saying. It's a cacophony of people bellowing out from every equivalent of a church spire, singing, God is great. There is one God, and he is Allah. Now, we have to look at it a little more thoughtfully. Because of our news and our perspective and our baggage, we don't like the word Allah. Allah is the word God. It's just God in Arabic. And what a billion Muslims are saying 5 times a day is there is one God with a lower, out of all the lowercase gods. So there's one God, lowercase, and he is God, uppercase, G-O-D. Do you see what I mean? It's what we say too. There's only one God. God is great. There is one God, and he is God. That's what Muslims are saying 5 times a day. In this global wave of praise like we have in the stadium, going all the way from Malaysia to Morocco and beyond. Woo! What a beautiful thing. How many people can get turned on by a Muslim call to prayer in a Lutheran church? If you've got a passport and if you've used it making the road, not as a playground, not as a school, but as a church, you can do that. I encourage people to get out of their comfort zones. I've got a little chapter in my teaching called Mazatlan or Managua. The choice is yours. Most of us are all going to go to some fancy resort on the coast of Mexico, swept free of local riffraff, just us and our wealthy white friends, with a plastic band on our wrists, giving us unlimited margaritas. We don't even need to dirty our fingers with that local currency. What a dreamy vacation, Pastor Hector, to Mexico. How many of those American travelers on vacation walked 3 blocks inland away from the expensive real estate and had a drink with a local? There's the travel experience. It just cost about 10% of what you're going to pay on the beach, and it's about 10 times as rewarding. Tourist, traveler, pilgrim. Do them both. My favorite country is India. Why would India be my favorite country? It just boxes my ethnocentrism. It shakes me up. It rearranges all my cultural furniture. It messes up my confidence that we know what's going on. India does things fundamentally different, and I just find it fascinating. Compare Indian classical music with Western classical music, and you get a little dose of that. My most powerful experiences, when I think about it, are times I've gone places my government does not want me to go. Think about it. If my government says I can't go there, it's on my bucket list. Amen. Nicaragua, Cuba, Iran, Palestine, Bulgaria. Nicaragua, that's where I learned that as a taxpayer, every bullet that flies and every bomb that drops from my country's military has my name on it. We have to drop them, we have to shoot them, I'm okay with that, but it's a responsibility as a Christian taxpayer. Wow. In Cuba, most of the brown Cubans are in Florida. Most of the black Cubans are in Cuba. There's a big change when the communists came. The rich people left, the poor people stayed. I was partying on a New Year's Eve in Cuba with a bunch of Cubans, and a kid was so excited that we were there, and he showed me his broken phone screen, and he had his favorite quote by Abraham Lincoln about slavery. And I just thought, what a cool thing that our president inspired some little kid in Cuba today. Travel. I was in Iran, stuck in a traffic jam. Tehran, a city of 10 million people, lots of traffic jams. Person in the car next over said, roll down your window. Handed a bouquet of flowers over to my driver and said, give this to the foreigner in your back seat and apologize for our traffic. That never happens on I-5. We're supposed to be upset about how bad Iranians are. Hey, there's a lot of good Iranians, and I got to meet one of them right there. I was in Palestine. When you go to Palestine, a lot of us go on our, Christian vacations to the Holy Land. Oh, it breaks my heart when somebody goes all the way to the Holy Land and doesn't really go to Palestine. You can bicycle from where Jesus was born to where he was crucified in 20 minutes. But the people who live there cannot cross that wall. It's a powerful experience. And any Christian trip to the Holy Land needs to give an honest look at Palestine, because the Christians you'll meet there have been from Christian families for 2,000 years, and it's exciting. It's exciting. And they've had a tough history. And there are a lot of people in Palestine still holding that rusty key of their grandpas when they were kicked out of their village, told to come back in a few weeks, there's going to be a problem, but get out of here now. That village is long gone, and they still hold that key, wishing they could go home, but they live in a refugee camp. Oh, so much, so many opportunities to broaden our perspective. When we travel, we get to know people who are supposed to be our enemies. That's a good thing. It makes it tougher for their propaganda to dehumanize us, and it makes it tougher for our propaganda to dehumanize them. We become family, and that is true to our faith. So we need to embrace the culture shock of travel to get to know people, Getting to know the family, that's what home is. The sort of big eureka for me was when I was 14 years old in Oslo in a park with my parents, and I looked out and I saw other parents loving their kids as much as my parents were loving me. And I just thought, whoa, this world is home to billions of equally precious, little, lovable children of God. And you realize that when you travel. Every country has its passion for this. When you go to Ireland, step into a pub, they say strangers are just friends who've yet to meet. When you have a grandchild, my grandchild Atlas, great name for a grandchild, Atlas, he's going to be 1 year old in a few weeks. And I'm so thankful for that beautiful little baby, and I see how happy it makes his mother, my daughter Jackie, and my son-in-law Damien. I would do anything for that little baby. You would do anything for your little grandchild. And then I look at photographs I have of nameless mothers and fathers and grandpas and grandmas with their adorable little bundle of joy, whose religion's different, whose skin's different, who lives south of the border. And I'm reminded that little kid is just as much God's beloved child as my precious grandchild, and yours too. That's a scary reality. And as Christians, we owe it to ourselves to broaden our perspective. Going home is recognizing that we're all children of God. I was just in Istanbul. I saw a little girl sitting alone on the sidewalk with 2 little packages of Kleenex in front of her, and she was selling, her parents planted her there, and she's selling Kleenex to make 25 cents today. And her parents are Syrian refugees. And there's 1 million Syrian refugees in that country. This is a reality. My little Atlas could be sitting on a curb selling Kleenex. This world's got some serious challenges, and we can be part of it as caring Christians. And when we travel, we gain empathy. We become the stranger. We can relate to that. I love when I'm lost, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm hungry because I'm far from home. I love to have that neediness. I love to connect and humanize people who are struggling because I come home with a very clear and important understanding that suffering across the street is no more real than suffering across the sea. And as thoughtful, honest Christians, that's our challenge. It's so easy to see a person across the street and take them out to dinner. That's great. But to ignore one person across the sea, they're out of sight, out of mind, we can't get there, but they exist and they're precious people, and our actions here impact people beyond what we could possibly imagine. And for me, to think that we would soften that by calling ourselves exceptional is heartbreaking. There's a lot of exceptionalism in our society. A traveler, a person that's honest to their Christian faith, knows there's nothing exceptional about 4% of this planet that happens to be the wealthy, privileged Americans. We have a lot to be thankful for, a lot to take care of, and I'm glad I live here, that's for sure. But the other 96% is worth getting to know, and we can learn a lot from them. And the people that don't know the other 96% don't have the curiosity to get out there and know it. You don't have to travel to get out there and know it. You have to have a curiosity to get out there and know it. It's so interesting to me when I travel that I find a mindset of scarcity here in the richest part of the world, and I find an amazing mindset of abundance when I travel to the poor world. People would give you the shirt off their back in the poor world, and here they might loan it to you if they're sure to get it back. This mindset of scarcity, mindset of abundance, you think about that when you travel. God's creation is home. When we travel, we realize, yes, we have a beautiful home here, but creation is one. I'm going to be in Morocco in a month. I'm going to wake up in the desert under a blanket of stars, celebrating that dimension of creation. I was just in Iceland, standing on a bluff, listening and watching and feeling the mighty power of a river crashing over that mountain. Walking in Switzerland on a ridge, with the lake stretching all the way to Germany on one side, incredible peaks on the other side, on a ridge. For me, it's the great, people ask me, what's your favorite church in Europe? On a ridge in Switzerland on a sunny day. It's enough to make a Lutheran raise their hands to the sky. Praise God. God is great. Life is good. Let that happen. On the road, you're not alone. You're starkly aware that it's you and God. It's a great experience. It's a great experience. You know, there's ethics of travel, the stewardship of travel. There's needy people. Is it right for us to spend the money to go there and take their photographs? There's climate change. Is it right to spend the carbon and make climate change worse by going there? I would say if you travel thoughtfully in a way that is transformational and you come home with what you learn and inspired by as Christians in this powerful corner of the world that we live in, it is ethical to travel if we come home and recognize that we have a stewardship obligation to get the most out of that travel and employ that in our walk as Christian Americans. Travel is a mindset. You don't need to be wealthy and get on an airplane to travel. You can travel, you can explore the world in Bora Bora, you can explore the world in Walla Walla, you can explore the world in Edmonds and Linwood. It's a mindset, and we just need to see home as God's creation and family as all God's children. So a lot of people will say, have a safe trip. I think a lot about this. I think they're saying, don't disturb your normal outlet, your world. It's like, have a safe Sunday. Don't go home with anything that messes up your status quo. As I like to say, Thomas Jefferson wrote, travel makes a person wiser, if less happy. You get complicated when you travel. So have a safe trip might be, don't complicate yourself with a broader perspective. I think a lot of people are just thinking about safety. I miss the times when we said bon voyage. Bon voyage. Get to know the world. Celebrate the world in all its diversity. Muhammad asks the Muslim followers, the faithful, to do 5 different things, 5 pillars of Islam. One of them is to go to Mecca. It's not really to go to Mecca. It's to leave home and travel and get to know God's creation. A progressive interpretation of Muslims' command to go to Mecca is get out and get to know the world. And when I come home, that's the greatest souvenir. I'm more thankful than ever to be home, but I'm also thankful that now I am a citizen of this planet with a heightened appreciation of God's great creation. You know, I'll just close with a thought. I love to share my Christian faith in a context of another culture, and that would be a Muslim dervish. A dervish is a Muslim monk. You know, they whirl, right? You've seen that. They whirl. And I will plant one foot in my home, my loved ones, Edmonds, my church family. The other foot will go around and celebrate the diversity in God's great creation. And then one hand will go up, acknowledge and accept the love of our Maker. The other hand will be like a tea kettle, showering God's love onto this creation. And as a good dervish, I will meditate, not on Muhammad's teaching, but on Jesus' teaching. How can I be a conduit of God's love? How can I be God's tool in helping God's love shower onto my family, my loved ones, my community, and His creation in general? And then I think what a joy and a privilege and a blessing it is to see creation as one, to see everybody as God's children, which means we're all brothers and sisters, and we can travel and get to know the family, and we're always, no matter how alone we feel, we're always in God's beautiful, loving embrace. And that's really why I'm so excited about traveling and seeing the whole world as home. Amen. Thank you.